Elasund, the first city. Oh boy. This always feels so weird here. Pull a little closer, not too much. So Catan has a lot of expansions to it, whatever. The basic of Catan is a very, very simple kind of game which appealed to a whole lot of people. It's sort of set as a certain kind of compromise between the very light Euros that I'm thinking of. Things, I can't even remember the name of it. Medici. And some of the Knizia lighter games. And the heavier stuff that some of us were more used to back, I don't remember when Catan sort of hit the U.S. I think it was in the mid-'90s, early '90s. And, it sort of provided a bridge. Now, the people who really liked the German games, the Euros, whatever you want to call them, I almost feel like the modern Euro is something so different from what these German games, or what we called Euros, were, right? They were all such clean concepts, and games, the ones that succeeded were well designed within that. They didn't have a lot of complexity to them. They didn't throw a lot of noise into them. This is kind of funny. This is, let's see, okay, so this is 2005. Euros are already starting to edge into that sort of heavier territory at this point, but nowhere near what they are now. And it feels like what Tuber did was he took some of the basic mechanisms that he used in Catan and in its, variants and expansions, and applied it to a game that, honestly, I feel has a fair amount in common with Tigris and Euphrates. Now, it's been a long time since I've played Tigris and Euphrates, so it may not really be... I may be making connections that aren't really there. But in Tigris and Euphrates, I feel like there was sort of a geographical spacing between the pieces that created a certain dynamic that allows you to, obtain these area majority situations. Now, Tuber already used majority type of mechanisms within Catan. And why am I throwing their names around? They're some of the few. They're probably the couple of Euro designers, and throw Wallace in there too, that I kind of recognize and know. So and I've played a fair amount of I've played a lot of Knizia stuff, and I really tend to like Knizia maybe more than I should, and with Catan. That for Tuber, that's really all I'm really aware of with him is the Catan series of stuff. I don't even know if he's designed anything outside of that. But it does feel like this is moving more towards that Tigris and Euphrates feel of applying power and force geographically. In a sort of with mechanisms to control that, obviously, to allow you to achieve certain goals in it, and to allow you to build buildings in this game. I like both games a fair amount. I think Tigris and Euphrates is brilliant, or at least I remember thinking it was. I haven't played it in a long time, so again, and I didn't play enough of it to really, for it to really gel in my head and be able to see that. But that I do bring that up a lot within the play and now within the review, because I really do feel like this is a movement in that direction. But like I think I said, or tried to say, and maybe it didn't spill out, this does not manage to kind of do what either game either Catan itself, and I don't know too much when you start throwing too many expansions. Oh, there's the Catan card game, which is kind of different too. But what either of those games kind of caught as their spark. I actually played a hell of a lot of the Catan card game. So the spark for Settlers of Catan was very much this sort of merging of the old style, empire building type game with this, German style of simplification and make the game easy and clean and try to cut to the heart of here are the things that you really need to do. And maybe there are there's certainly different pathways. They're not all successful. And you might end up following pathways in Catan that are not wise. But the ones that are wise at least make some sense. And you can see why, if I'd thought a little harder before I started playing this the first time, maybe I would have seen these obvious connections. Certainly, one of my buddies who was very much into the Euros was very good at immediately sort of assessing what at least one of the good pathways would be. He very seldom pulled up completely short the way I tend to, where I'm like, well, I thought this would be a good idea, but it's shit, and I'm just screwed forever. So kind of the magic of Catan was being able to merge those two things and come up with a game that's fairly simple to play, fairly intuitive, yet was still interesting enough of a challenge for the Eurogamers, who often wanted a more abstract feel to the games. Now, I know Catan has lost a lot of it doesn't have a hell of a lot of love over at BGG, at least among, the sort of the better people, among the Eurogamers. Yeah, there I go. But yeah, I think it had something magical that really did catch people and, was pretty impressive in its own way. And on the other side of it, for that more Eurogamer, for the more serious Eurogamer type, if such a thing exists, I would say Tigris and Euphrates really is an exemplification of that. Very, very simple game with deep, deep strategy. Felt almost Go-like in a lot of ways, but with the patterns being different. Where this goes wrong is it doesn't keep the simplicity that either of those games kind of had. Now, Settlers of Catan wasn't really simple. It was intuitive. It felt like you could follow a path and understand what you were doing. This doesn't have that. This has all that kind of layering of, I'm not going to say obfuscation because that's not at all what it is, but of complex geometric strategy and implications that kind of emerge from the gameplay and are not cleanly aware to you when you first look at it, that Tigris and Euphrates has. But it adds to that a randomness factor, which feels unnecessary. Maybe it's necessary in this design, but Tigris and Euphrates gets away with being this brilliant multiplayer pure strategy game. And this feels like a step down from that. But then it also adds a clutter factor to it. The components on the board, it's not instantly accessible. Both Catan and Tigris and Euphrates, you could look at the board and there's, in the case of Catan, there's sort of clear intuitive factors that just leap out at you and you understand, here's the roads, here's the places that are producing, and I've got my own little kingdom and it runs on its own, and it's not going to get interfered with too directly. You can't body slam the other person's position in that game. This one, the board ends up a mess of buildings, none of which kind of correlate with any others. It's just really this mechanism for either generating income or places to put your victory point cubes. As such, it does not. It neither plays as cleanly as the intuitive kind of play that you can get in Catan, whether it's effective or not. No, any style of play in Catan feels intuitive. It's just a question of, did you choose the right intuitive route or one of the right ones? But nor does it have that sort of easy to assess as in chess, or even for the most part Go, as you get used to the patterns, board state that Tigris and Euphrates provides, where it really focuses your brain on the things that matter in the game. This one throws a lot of color and a lot of clutter at you that kind of distract you from that deep thinking strategy game. Okay. That's sort of the main of it all. But since I tend to like to babble, let's start looking at components. And the board is kind of, unimpressive, a grid, whatever. It's good quality. I always feel like the backside should be used for something if you're going to print on it. They print some pictures on it, that's nice and all. But I almost feel like there should be another game on there, or another type of board, a different version. That makes it harder, though, to play test. You have to play test both versions. And this one already has 3 different boards on it, right? For different numbers, for the different player counts. The components themselves are good stock. What you'd expect from a Euro, there's no question there. I did find that when you look at the colored components when you're looking at the various buildings, some of them require a cube on them, some of them don't. The ones that don't kind of blend in with the ones that do. The 2 different means of telling who owns something, the way they differ, is enough to create a little bit of the confusion and some of that clutter and noise in the visual representation that you're dealing with in the game. And again, that is part of the problem. Is just those. The little cards are okay. They're Euro-style cards. I mean, they're good quality and everything, but they're a pain in the butt to shuffle and deal with because they're small. I don't know what to do with all these pieces. Something could stick in there. See, this doesn't fit anymore if I do that. It held up, it's these stupid, the inserts are just such a questionable thing in all, or almost all games. And here I am struggling with them to get them in some way that they kind of hold up. Where the game really kind of falls apart is the rulebook itself. It's full of ambiguities. It is designed in a horribly colorful and picture-based sort of means. There's rules that you don't, in addition to completely ambiguous situations, some of which are largely pretty minor. There are places where actual understanding of what the rule actually means can only be discovered by looking in the examples. There's this rules detail section, which I kind of harped on during play or during the rules intro, because these are key rules to the game that are just kind of like pushed aside to some other section for no good reason that I can see. Overall, it's a pretty crappy rule book. You're going to have to make some house rules, but they're probably pretty intuitive however you want to interpret the rules. It probably isn't that big a deal. It's just you don't have a good clue. You start reading the rules, and although the game has very, very simple victory conditions, it doesn't tell you what they are until the end of the game part of the rule. Normally, with a Euro, it's no big deal because you're going to say, well, the victory conditions are to get the most points out of this point salad. The victory conditions on this are very simple. It's to get all your cubes on the board. And that's all it is. That's what the game is about. It's not about building a city or anything else. It's about getting your cubes on the board. Okay, there's no real. It's a euro. There's no real meaning behind any of this. It's really an abstract with dressing on it, and that's fine. The game does show a lot of conflict in it, a lot of capability to smack people down. Well, to smack positions down, and that's sort of the Tigris and Euphrates feel to it. This real capability to take people out of the lead in certain situations, or to hit people just because it's what's best for you at that time. It's the thing that gives you the most advantage, is just happens to hit somebody else, and hey, too bad for them. The capability to use other people's pieces and leverage them with your own, and possible bidding wars essentially happening with pieces. We didn't see too much of that happening where they really went up, because it was usually easier to do something else, to either run away with a piece or something. Anything in particular about the rules? You know, it's really... So one of the things that might be very good, but which I found incredibly frustrating, is that it is a hard game to kind of comprehend between the clutter on the board and whatnot, but also the sort of intrinsic ways of how you can take over space and get your own buildings there, and ways that you can defend buildings. Where I think if you're the kind of person who likes to play a couple of games, and, you know, at least until you feel like you have a fair grasp of what the strategy might be, this isn't a bad choice for that. It's going to give you some room with that noise and that clutter. It's not an obfuscation of the rules or the victory conditions so much as an obfuscation of the board state, which is what I found particularly annoying. But I think there's a lot of room in here still for strategy and whatnot. It's just that it's a little bit more painful and less cleanly delivered. In terms of, like, I prefer my Euros to be pure, right? And this one's a little less pure. On the other hand, for the people who really do like Euros, who like some of the Euro concepts, this suffers from some of the same problems that Settlers of Catan has, which is luck. Oh, and yeah, speaking of luck, the little wooden dice, I'm not going to open it up to show you the little wooden dice. The little wooden dice always feel like they don't provide good luck, a balanced rolling to me. Some of that may be that you really need to throw them in a box or through a dice tower or something like that to get the full randomization on them. They don't feel like they tumble right. I don't know why. It just feels like heavier dice give you a little bit more tumble. Some of the times, and maybe in some of the games, because, wood has different density in it, unlike plastic. I feel like the wooden dice situation is such that the dice are actually unbalanced. And you'll see that with things like, stupid numbers like 11 coming up way too often. I've definitely seen that in games of Settlers of Catan. Anyway, that's sort of a summation of, the takeaways that I got from actually playing it, the playthrough, and you got what you got.